I want to welcome you to the traditional territory of Treaty Number 6. The Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations was informed by the Government of Canada on major funding cuts to our organization. These cuts are occurring to Aboriginal regional organizations and tribal councils. The FSIN's funding will be reduced from $1.6 million to $500,000 starting in the 2014-2015 fiscal year. The FSIN does not anticipate any immediate cuts to service and/or staff. The Federation is currently assessing the impacts of the cuts. However, our organization will continue to provide the same level of service and advocacy to our First Nation members that we always have. We believe the Government of Canada is attempting to weaken our position to assist our communities in the betterment and the quality of life. The Canadian government is attempting to mute our Indigenous voices collectively by cutting funding to our Legislative Assembly and our organization's ability to provide an effective political voice. But I am here to tell you that we are not going away, nor will we ever give up our inherent and treaty rights. As you know, the FSIN has been protecting inherent and treaty rights since 1946. And today we stand in unity and solidarity with our people. Leaders and allies, we are here to tell the government of the day that we will take our rightful place as Indigenous peoples of our land and country. This federal government, as you know, has endorsed the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. As stated in the Prime Minister of Canada's address during the 2012 First Nations Canada Gathering, Prime Minister Harper told First Nations and the rest of Canada in saying, "This reaffirms our aspiration and our determination to promote and protect the rights of Indigenous peoples at home and abroad." Prime Minister Harper also stated, "The greatest respect that we can show to First Nations men and women is to provide them with the tools, to credit them with the capacity, and then allow them to move forward." But all we have seen since these comments is the real agenda of the Canadian government and the continued erosion of our Indigenous rights. I talk of Bill C-428, which is his private member's bill, Bill C-38, which is an omnibus bill, and now this plan for the privatization of reserved lands. First Nations in Saskatchewan are facing great contradiction. We live in a time of great opportunity, yet we are experiencing some of the greatest challenges that we have ever faced. But I know that as Indigenous peoples, we will build strength and character as we continue to move ourselves forward. And with that, I'm Mervyn. I will ask you to introduce Vice Chief Bird.
Thank you, Interim Chief Watson. Our next presenter and speaker is Vice Chief Simon Bird. Vice Chief Bird is in charge of the education file for the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations. With that, Vice Chief Simon Bird.
Modawitsas no mo tatuskiunan. Ego gisitos kamago at tibamatuina. Anos kikskitinano. No manam stay, gitimate, gitit nimino. Kikskitinano. Do manam michi gitimagis, gitit nimino. Umanos ka bixkitamago yak. Osmis. Nuabatin and got gitimagis, gitit nimino, kiga, and I got bixkistamago. My friends and relatives, in my own language, in the Cree language, I've said, so many of our people today in our First Nations have already such a lack of voice to bring attention to their dismal situations, to the social issues that we currently face so much as Aboriginal people, especially First Nations people on our reservations. That these new announcements of funding cuts, you know, it really hurts me to see that those voices are even going to be more unheard, I'll say, muzzled, eliminated. This organization does a very good job of bringing those issues forward in collaboration with our First Nations governments. With INAC slashing funding for tribal councils and regional organizations like the FSIN, the voice of First Nations people, like I said, is muzzled. The supports are removed from our people become vulnerable, even more so. For over 100 years of experiments in First Nations education for our children, the federal government has failed. Only when Indians took control in the 1970s of education did we start turning the results around. In spite of underfunded schools for our students, our graduating at the highest rates in history. Slashing the funding eliminates the supports that have been producing these results. If this is the result of the Prime Minister's apology, we don't want any more apologies.
Thank you, Vice Chief Bird. With that, we're going to open the floor to questions. Please let us know who you'd like to ask the question to, and we'll bring one of the Vice Chiefs up. Okay, Vice Chief Watson.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. That's probably, I guess, a question that they would have to answer. We see this as a tremendous time in this region, in Saskatchewan, and we can only speak for this region. But, you know, with an aging workforce, with an emerging First Nations population, we think the time is great, that there should be greater investment in First Nation people. We believe that slashing budgets isn't the way to provide that opportunity to build a better Saskatchewan. And so we think that when we look back in history, some of the greatest accomplishments has been led by First Nation communities. And we talk of things like the First Nation University, SIIT, the First Nation Bank of Canada, Saskatchewan Indian Gaming Authority. When governments work with First Nation leadership, not only at the FSIN level, the tribal council level, but at the reserve level, we've always had success. And so therefore, we feel that rather than cutting budgets, we feel now is the time to invest in First Nation people and communities. So we can't understand why they would do the opposite and start cutting back on budgets when we think the time is to invest in First Nation people and communities. Well, again, that's probably work in progress right now. We do have to, you know, I mean, we have to look at ways. Anytime you take $1 million away, that's to any organization, and especially to an organization like us, that's a lot of money. However, we have a little bit of time to work on some options, and I think that the executive, our senior staff here at the Federation are going to continue to do that, and we'll bring some options out and see what we can do to ensure that we don't cut the level of service to our First Nation communities who have in the past worked with the Federation in developing their communities. So hopefully that we can still provide that level of service that we're doing today. Well, again, when we met with the Prime Minister in January 2012, you know, he had mentioned that you know, now is a good time to capitalize on, and I think his words were that young population, Aboriginal population, to educate, to get them skilled, to get them employable, to get them providing for their families and communities. You know, we wanted to build on that, but although they're facing cuts in other regions, we just think that in Saskatchewan, when, as I mentioned earlier, when the federal government or any other government works and supports the efforts of First Nation people and communities, we've always had success. And we're just saying that with a young population out there, we feel now is the time to invest rather than cutting budgets that cut services to the people that should be benefiting. Well, you know, when we look at the areas that they're cutting today, I mean, you know, the 1.6 that we use, number one, a lot of it is used to gather our people, to have legislative assemblies so we can talk and strategize of how we want to better the quality of life for our band members. A lot of it also is to you know, to help operate, to help make the Federation as effective and as efficient as it is today, with some operational monies to say run our finance department, or have Treasury Board that oversees the spending of the Federation to ensure there's accountability. So I guess it's going to affect us along those lines, that that's where the money has to come from, and it's in specific areas that that money that we use, you know, to better the organization and things like that. So that's where that the 1.1 is coming from. So we have to look at alternative ways of replacing that money and still offering the service to our people and communities. We don't, as the Federation, we don't have the breakdown of the 10 tribal councils of how it affects them, because they have agreements, of course, with the government. So we don't know the total amount. But like I say, I think what we're saying is, because the tribal councils and the Federation have played a very important role in the success of First Nations in this region, we think that any cuts to the Federation and to the tribal councils, of course, will have some very adverse effects on our ability to continue to move our communities and people forward. Well, again, that's something, Jason, that we're working on. As you know, we just got the word 24 hours ago, so we're in the process of having our senior financial people put together some scenarios, put together some options. When we feel that you know, we have some options that limit, I guess, the impact on what we're doing for our First Nation communities, we'll present those to our leadership. We'll discuss it with them, and I'm sure they'll give us direction from those options that we are in the process of working on right now. Well, again, those are options that I think we will look at, but having, I think the Federation and our First Nation communities will focus on the election. That'll continue to take place, and then we will probably discuss options thereafter the following of the election.